Being in the Israeli-occupied West Bank is always a surreal experience. Israeli barrier walls have divided these Palestinian lands, allowing Jewish settlements to spring up on many of the hilltops. I'm heading to Ramallah to meet Palestinian politician and activist Hanan Ashrawi, her face synonymous with Palestinian negotiations for statehood. Yet after nearly 4 decades of activism inside and out of government, Palestine, the state, seems distant, maybe impossible. I spoke to her about the war raging in Gaza and what it means for the future of Palestine. Dr. Hanan Ashrawi, good to talk to you.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
How are you feeling about everything since October the 7th?
Well, if it's a question of feelings, sometimes we feel there is so much shock and pain and heartbreak that we can't feel anymore. It's very hard to think dispassionately and logically and so on when you see so much death and destruction and killing and deliberate and willful infliction of pain. It's just amazing. And the world is watching. There are not just war crimes and crimes against humanity, and these are deliberate massacres. And you're seeing whole families destroyed, bodies strewn everywhere. You're seeing everything that is basic to life, from hospitals to universities to schools to shopping centers. Everything is being destroyed. So I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, but I'm just feeling I'm heartbroken, I'm angry, I'm upset, and I think that they have violated the most basic norms of morality and human behavior, and they are inflicting so much pain, death, and destruction on a captive, helpless population. And it's deliberate, and it's out in the open, and the whole world is watching. So clearly now we are seeing the fault lines of north-south, the global south versus the north, east and west. We're seeing the colonial white supremacist mentality take over, the dehumanization and demonization of the Palestinians, and giving Israel free rein to wreak so much havoc and destruction. So this is what impunity breeds, when you can act outside the law and with full protection and inhumanity, you just become totally inhuman, basically. That's what Israel has become.
East Jerusalem and the occupied West Bank separate geographically and politically from Hamas and Gaza. To what extent has this Palestinian disunity over all these years contributed to the mess that we have now?
I don't think it's the disunity that contributed. In Palestine, yes, we have always had a pluralistic political system, and we've had mainstream and we've had oppositions, and we've had several parties from the extreme left to the, I don't want to call Hamas extreme right, but it's an ideological party. The problem is that this created, again, a rift. This created a weakness within the Palestinian body politic. Whenever you have such a rift that is based on rivalry and exclusion, rather than differences of opinion that can be accommodated democratically, that's when you weaken yourself. And this, Hamas was created in, 1987, 88 was their first statement, yes, March 88. And before that, there were several different parties and movements and factions and so on. But with Hamas, the separation, let's put it that way, in terms of politics, ideology, and then in terms of modus operandi, and then with the signing of the peace agreement, the differences became much more apparent. Even though Hamas did run for elections, as you know, and did win majority seats in 2005, but still, 2006, it created a gap, an opening through which anybody could enter by saying, we have nobody to talk to who represents you. Hamas, is a terrorist organization. It was labeled as such because it adopted the armed struggle approach. And so using that label and that refrain constantly, they tried to label all Palestinians, and particularly all Palestinians in Gaza, as terrorists. So this rift certainly weakened the Palestinians. And there were two different approaches to the political situation, whether through a negotiated settlement, which the PLO and the factions within it adopted, or the armed struggle which Hamas used. So with two different approaches, it led to two different ways in which the people of the West Bank and of Gaza were treated. But the objective is the same. The objective is the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. The objective is the displacement of Palestinians and replacement of Palestine with Greater Israel. And this is what's happening.
And one of the things that Netanyahu attempts to emphasize is that October the 7th happened completely unprovoked. Now, people such as yourself and others would say, well, there's a totting up over a long, long time of all these tensions, all these aggressions in the West Bank with the settlers, with a lot of these things set against the backdrop of occupation and siege. Mm-hmm. For a lot of the Israelis, I spoke with Ehud Olmert recently, and he even told me it wasn't so much that there was an attack on October the 7th, but it was the nature of the attack that was the switch for so many Israelis. Mm-hmm. It was the egregiousness of the intimacy of the violence and the killing of the people in the border communities. Address that for me. Was there something that made you squeamish about the attack?
There are several issues that are different in this. I mean, of course, the whole world saw how Israel bombed and shelled and killed Gaza in 5 instances, where they killed thousands and thousands of Palestinians and demolished whole neighborhoods. And that wasn't seen as something horrific because that's from a distance. That's not personal. I just push a button, I just do this and I can, destroy your home and your neighborhood and your whole area and so on with no accountability whatsoever. So there was a modus operandi that was horrific. To me, it was horrific. You're allowed to kill from long distance. You're allowed to kill in an impersonal way. You're allowed to kill if you're anonymous, if you use high tech. But should your victim react, then that's terrorism. There was this asymmetry, this lethal equation. All right. Now, for 16, 17 years, Gaza was a prison. Gaza was under siege. People had the minimal level of subsistence of a normal life. And Israel did so deliberately. And every once in a while it shot and killed and maimed and injured and so on. So there was an ongoing deliberate torture of people in Gaza, imprisoned like that. The one surprise to the Israelis was the fact that they had become complacent in 2 ways. One, they had absolute faith in the army, the invincible army, and in their high-tech weaponry and walls and I don't know what, in order to think that they are able to withstand any kind of attack or approach, and that they can keep the Gazans within Gaza without any chance of their breaking out. This is one. 2, there's a sense of racism there. It's this patronizing, condescending attitude. Oh, we know what the Palestinians are, we know what they're capable. They can lob a few pipes here and there, it doesn't matter. But they didn't see, they were shocked at the fact that these militants broke out, that they had planned for 2 years since this fascist government in Israel took over, that they had succeeded in a military operation and they took the battle to Israel. Because usually Israel takes the battle to other people's lands, whether it's even in Syria or in Lebanon, in the West Bank and Gaza. They attack. They're on other people's lands. They kill other people, and they can kill their civilians and so on with impunity. Look at what they do in the West Bank every day, every night. They enter homes, they destroy, they abduct, they kill, they torture. It's okay, even though it's intimate, the torture, and if you've seen the pictures of what they do. But to them, it's the element of surprise, and it's the loss of the invincibility, and the fact that they are untouchable in the sense that you cannot reach me, that I can do whatever I want, and I'm used to the fact that I can act with impunity and with no accountability. That's another shock. 3, there was something really horrific, in the sense that they immediately came out with lies. They immediately came out with Photoshop pictures, for example, the burnt child or something, which was
But
later
not all of it was lies, though. I mean,
not all of it,
some of these
course,
things from Qassam body cam cameras, there were some crimes
pictures,
that were committed.
Of course there were, because when you come out and you attack, it's not just the fighters, it's not just the militants who are out there. As you saw, lots of Gazans just came out because they saw that there's a break in the fence, that they can't do it. And they did come out. So, yes, there were horrific things that happened. But people didn't understand the context, that this is what has been happening to the Palestinians day in and day out for years, since the creation of the State of Israel. And this is what reminded Palestinians and our parents' generation and so on of 1948, that the intimate massacres, the killing of innocent civilians, the total eradication and razing of 500 villages, the expulsion of 750,000, that this is how Israel was created. And now it is repeating that. So there is a historical memory, there is a pain, and there is a current memory of being targeted, of being a sitting duck, being a victim all the time, and imprisoned and beaten and killed. So they came out. Some of them took revenge, yes. But what is different, and nobody, of course, approves of the killing of civilians. We don't need to prove our moral fiber, you know. But what bothers me is the fact that as a result, Israel felt it had license, and it was encouraged and rewarded by the US, by the UK, by Germany, and so on, to, as a matter of policy, carry out this carnage, these massacres, this genocide. It's not a few people who walked away, who came out. It's not fighters who are not a disciplined army. It's not. It's the fact that this state, as a matter of policy and government, took a decision to carry out genocide and is doing it.
You say genocide, so what's the end game then for Gaza? What do you think they want?
Well, Gaza is not separate. Look, from the beginning they wanted to empty out Gaza. They said so. He said, I want to turn Gaza into rubble, which he's proceeding to do. Then he said he wants to push them south, and they still are pushing them south. He wants to destroy and kill Hamas.
He as in Netanyahu?
Yeah. And his ilk and his group of fascist murderers, really. So, I mean, I think they had several targets, several objectives. And they sort of kill and proceed, and let's see what we can do. They found out, I think, they cannot get rid of Hamas. It's ridiculous, because so far they still don't know what Hamas is or who Hamas is. Whether we agree with it or disagree, you have to look at facts. Are you going to kill all the people who belong to Hamas or support Hamas? Are you going to kill them political, as they said, as well as the military wings, as well as their social systems and organizations and so on? What can you do? So they wanted to get rid of Hamas, eradicate Hamas. They cannot do it. They want to render Hamas unable to fight, destroy its military wing. If they're unable to find them till now, after more than 7 weeks, how are they going to find them without moving to the total razing and destruction of all of Gaza, all of the Strip? And they are doing it. So then they said they want to kick them out. The expulsion, the forced dispossession, uprooting and expulsion and displacement of Palestinians. Of course, the Palestinians aren't going to leave, even though 75% of the people of Gaza are already refugees since 48, when Israel was created, and expelled them. The villages, the towns they're looking out were their own villages and towns and so on. So there is a real determination. There's a collective historical trauma among the Palestinians. 1948 will not happen again. We will not be expelled. Right. We will not leave. And you hear them saying, we will die where we are, but we will not leave. And it's the same in the West Bank. So, so the what next depends on how it ends as well. But one should understand that there are basic underlying principles that must be observed and respected. Palestinians have the right to be free, to live in dignity and sovereignty on their own land. We have the right to self-determination, to determine what our own system is. And we don't want to see any more. It's not just occupation. I mean, really, it's a post-colonial, neo-colonialism to the point where people feel free to reorganize our lives and our demography and see how to move us from one place to the other, expel us into Sinai, push us into the desert in Gaza, or expel us to the East Bank if you're in the West Bank, and so on. So all these, and increasing and intensifying violence and murder and destruction, is not going to produce results. They haven't since 48, and they won't produce results. Maybe it's time for a mind shift.
One of the theories, you say there's time for a mind shift. One of the ideas is that the PA will retake control of the Gaza Strip in addition to the West Bank after the Israeli goal of eliminating or at least crippling Hamas is achieved. While we were setting up in your office, I noticed you had the recent book by the Palestinian American historian Rashid Khalidi, talks about the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. And I was reminded of an interview he did with El País recently. Now, I know you're not directly, I'm just going to call it up on my phone, you're not directly involved with the PA anymore. You're out of that political picture right now. But something
I'm
interesting.
an independent. So
absolutely.
I can speak my mind.
But I mean, when we think of Oslo, we think of the Madrid conference, we think of all the negotiations on behalf of the PLO and the Palestinian Authority. You're one of the faces that springs to mind, and you would accept that.
Of course, I worked hard.
Yeah, something very interesting that he said in response to the question from El País about, is the Palestinian National Authority a viable option in Gaza? And I know you suspect he's going to criticize the PA harshly here. He says, one of the great problems the Palestinians have is a lack of strategic thinking and young, innovative leadership. We have an old and corrupt leadership in Ramallah that is politically bankrupt. It has no ideas and continues to pursue a strategy that failed decades ago. It failed after the 93 Oslo Accords. It failed before the Second Intifada. They have empty minds, and most Palestinians hate them for being collaborators with Israel. They are not a viable alternative for the Palestinians. Israel wants the Palestinian National Authority, of course, because Israel and the United States created it. That's Rashid Khalidi.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, he's a friend of mine. We work together. It may be extreme, but in a sense, what he says is essentially true. That we do have a dysfunctional political system. It has been manipulated. Now, you want to talk about the system and the structure and the institutions, or the individuals. There are, I think, two separate things.
Some good people in a bad system. Or
no,
the other way around.
I think
good structures but bad people.
We are able to create systems. We are able to legislate laws. We are able to build institutions. The Palestinian people are highly educated and they're highly skilled, and they want to build themselves up internally. We just don't have a political class, a political elite, let's say, that can govern. The moment that can create a system of governance, the moment they took over, somehow the idea of ruling, of governing with a sense of appropriation, like they own the people and the land and the cause and the discourse and everything, and they stuck to their positions. Yes, they are old. Nothing against being old, I'm old, but I left because when I resigned, I said we need young, fresh minds who know and who can reach the world and who understand the requirements of decent governance and so on. I left because I also knew there were all sorts of things wrong with the system in a variety of ways, including political decision making. And because the agreements positioned them in a way as to protect the security of the Israelis, whether they're settlers or the army or whatever, without enabling them, without giving them any tools or accepting that they have the right to protect their own people. And this is a major factor for the loss of credibility and confidence and respect.
And is that why a lot of people support Hamas?
A lot of people, I mean, look, you have to be more ideological to support Hamas. The younger generation is not Islamist in a way. They are more, if you think about ideology, they are more secular, they are more progressive, they are more open-minded, they want to reach out and change. Support for Hamas came because Hamas was seen to do something about the occupation. The resistance itself as an idea is an attitude as well, that you are not a tool of the occupation, that you are not a subcontractor, as the PA is being called, of the occupation. And in that sense, yes, people accept that kind of Hamas. But if we have elections now, you can never have elections under trauma. People are really traumatized now, whether in the West Bank or in Gaza. You have to stop the carnage. You have to stop all this before you start talking about elections. And I'm sure that the PLO factions will not win in any election. It will not get a majority. It's very clear. And I still believe that only the Palestinian people have the right to choose their own representatives and leadership, not as a hollow slogan, the way Biden says it and others, but really in a way that empowers the Palestinians. Between Hamas and Fatah, this polarization, there are others now. And there's a rising younger generation who speaks a different language, who seeks other objectives, and who are not tainted by the mistakes and the corruption and the abuse of the past. So whether both sides, I mean, if you look at public opinion polls before, people did not there was no majority for Fatah or for Hamas among the Palestinians. But now, because Hamas is targeted, people are rallying to protect Hamas and to not to in any way condemn it. But at the same time, once the dust settles and once people have the right to reflect, I'm sure they would want to have a leadership that would be an expression of their own aspirations and rights, and that would protect their aspirations and rights. Now, to say that the PA has to go to Gaza, I mean, look, there are PA people, of course, in Gaza. The PA pays the salaries of the doctors, of some security people, of teachers. They're not totally separate.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and I don't think that it can happen in a way that would render the PA an instrument of the occupation to protect Israel's security in Gaza. Yeah. They need to re-establish anyway, whether the PA as an institution, which is dispensable, I think, or whether the individual parties, the PLO and others, it needs to re-establish its own credibility. People need to have leadership that they trust, leadership that they respect, leadership that is an expression, as I said, of their own rights and aspirations. And this is what needs to be done. So we need to have more, I don't know, different political parties, organizations, groups that will, in general, generate an agenda, a political agenda.
And space for young people.
Of course, young people and women, because I've worked in politics most of my life. I've been the exception, or the small minority, but women make a difference in government, in governance, in positions of responsibility. They do. We have a different mindset when it comes to how to discharge our responsibilities. And of course, the young people have a fresh image. I have nothing against experience. provided you don't think you have a monopoly on power and resources and everything. But the young need to be able to find their own space, and they need to find expression and shaping their future.
Dr. Ashrawi, I have so much more to ask you, but we're out of time. So I thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All the best to you.
Take
care.